Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we'll be taking a look at a extremely budget option for those of you looking to build with the B550 chipset on your AM4 platform. Keep watching to find out more. Okay, so in today's video we'll be taking a look at the Asrock B550M Phantom Gaming 4. This is possibly one of the cheapest motherboards at the moment in the micro ATX form factor for the AM4 platform. So if you're looking at building a system late 2022, early into 2023, and before we get a massive slew of B650 motherboards for the AM5 platform, then maybe if you're on AM4 still and you want to make a little cheap PC, this is potentially the way to go for it. Now, this board hasn't got any particular real frills or any real excitement to it, but it does tick an awful lot of boxes. And again, if you're using micro ATX form factor, then potentially you can save yourself a few quid. At the moment, this retails in the UK for somewhere in the region of about £80, which does appear actually at the moment to be around about £10 to £20 cheaper than pretty much everything else on the market. Now, clearly there have been some kind of design decisions to actually come within that price point. And as long as you're not looking at doing some serious overclocking on this board, then I think it's going to be absolutely fine. Of course, if you want to use things like Precision Boost Overdrive or just XMP profiles, like pretty much 99% of the people buying AM4 platforms these days, this is going to be absolutely fine. And you do have options if you want to add things like Crossfire, which is probably not a great idea, but certainly it is an option. But in today's video, we'll go through the quick unboxing, show you exactly what you get, go through all the ports, and then we'll come back at the end with my final thoughts and recommendations. So first of all, let's take a look at the packaging. As you can see, it's got the Asrock Phantom Gaming logo on there, which is part of their kind of slightly more budget-orientated brand. It's it's very minimalistic, but it seems to do the job. Something which is actually pretty cool is the fact that it does come already out of the box with the Ryzen 5000 series desktop processor ready logo on the box. Not entirely sure whether it's going to support 5600G, 5700G, and also things like the 4500, which came out ironically after the rest of the 5000 series. So we'll be checking into that a little bit later. Something which is actually very cool about these boards is the fact that Asrock boards generally come with a sticker actually on the BIOS itself, which tells you exactly which revision is currently installed. Now, this particular board doesn't have any form of BIOS flashback utility in terms of if you haven't got a CPU or a CPU-less upgrade. It doesn't have that, but at least having that sticker on the BIOS is going to take some of that guesswork out. So if your system isn't working, you kind of know why that is. Obviously, if you have got a really new processor and it isn't covered by that BIOS revision, then yeah, it's not going to be a great time. So do bear that in mind. You may need to actually get hold of an older processor in order to flash this to use your newer processor, which is something we were used to doing years ago. But these days, with modern pros and cons of BIOS flashback utilities, that has kind of taken some of that out of it. Anyway, let's move on. So it does support HDMI, also polychrome sync, so plenty of RGB and addressable RGB on this board, so that's always a nice thing, at least in my opinion it is. Also supports the 3rd gen Ryzen processors, so there will be a link in the video description. So if you're not sure if this is going to work with your particular CPU or officially work with your CPU, there'll be a link, so you click on that and you can see what actual processors are supported by this board. On the back of the box goes through some of the key features. There aren't a great deal, so let's not get too excited, but you do have PCI Express Gen 4, which is going to be great for some people. Obviously, if you're looking at maybe upgrading at a later date when the Ryzen processors, the 5000 series, do come a little bit cheaper, you can throw one of those in there and take advantage of that PCI Express Gen 4 bandwidth. We've also got dual M.2s for SSDs, so the top one is going to be PCI Express Gen 4 x 4, the bottom one is going to be PCI Express Gen 3 x 2, so in terms of storage, you're going to be fine. You've got 4 SATAs as well. Supports polychrome sync RGB, so again, addressable RGB or regular RGB. You've got dual graphics outputs on the actual board itself, so you've got both a DisplayPort 1.4 and an HDMI 2.1. Also, you've got full spike protection, all those kind of usual things like over voltage, under voltage protection, and you've got a 2-ounce PCB. You've also got the app shop, which you can get to get some of Asrock's apps for controlling things like fan speed, RGB, USB charging, all that kind of good stuff. Also, it shows you what the I/O is like on the back, but you'll be seeing that later on, and also gives you a list of the specifications in detail. If you want to see that, pause the video now. So for those wondering what is actually included in the box, you get all the usual kind of stuff. So there is a separate I/O shield which attaches to the back of your PC. This is probably going to get lost the next time you do a motherboard swap, but certainly you do get one included. There's also a driver DVD disc and also an Asrock sticker, which you can adorn to the front of your PC. There is a quick start guide and user manual, which goes through in actually quite a lot of depth, telling you what all the connections and stuff do. all very good. You get a couple of SATA cables, and also there are 2 M.2 screws. Don't know why they couldn't put 2 into one pack. That would save a little bit of plastic, but hey ho, it is what it is. At least they're included. So there you go, that's what's in the box, that's what it's all about. Let's take a look and see what the connectivity is like. So we'll start off with the motherboard. First of all, the first thing that noticed to me is actually, it does look like a pretty cool board. It's all black, a few little accent colours on there, but they do have it in this kind of sapphire black look, which I kind of like. I'm not entirely keen of those multicolored boards or the Gigabyte boards where they tend to be a little bit on the brown side. This I think is a very neutral and should fit in with most builds. You've got at the top corner, you've got your 8-pin EPS connector. No need for a separate 4-pin as well with that. Realistically, with the VRM on here and also the price point it's aimed for, realistically you're not going to need that extra amount of power going through to the socket. You've also got a heatsink, a very minimalist one, but you do have some decent fins on there. This is a 8-phase VRM. For most people, 6 8-core processors are going to be absolutely fine. Moving across at the top here, so we've got our CPU fan header. So this is going to be a PWM controlled one. All of the fan headers on here, of which there are 4 in total, they are all available to choose in the BIOS or actually in the software for either PWM or DC control or water pump control, and you've got full control of all of the speeds within that as well. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Very easy to use, to be honest with you. You've got 4 RAM slots here, so this can support up to 128 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, up to a whopping 4733 megahertz, which is yeah, more than most RAM on the market. Most people, I think, will be tying this up with some cheap and cheerful DDR4 3600. Again, that is going to be absolutely fine as well. In this top corner, we've got some addressable RGB and normal RGB, so 2 connections there for that. Underneath that, you've got a 24-pin power connector, no surprises there. Next to that, you've got the first of our USB 3.0 front panel header connectors. There is one here, and there's also one towards the bottom as well. You've also got some SATA connectors as well, so 4 SATA connections. This is going to be great because obviously depending on what you plug in, you're not going to get the disruption of SATA channels if you do choose to use other slots. Boards that have 6 SATA connections normally have 2 of the ports running off the chipset, etc., or from whatever, and they can sometimes get disabled, so that's fine. All 4 can be in use at the same time. You've got a small heatsink here over the B550 chipset. Moving across here, you've got a header for motherboard programming, but what is really important is just down here, you see there's a little sticker there saying P2.10, which is the revision of the BIOS, which is currently installed on this motherboard from the factory. So with you having that information, you can then head over to the website, check out which version it is and see what processors are supported, and see if maybe your Ryzen 5 4500 is supported already, or whether or not you're going to have to get an older processor in order to flash the BIOS. Moving across from that, we've got the Hyper M.2 slot. So Hyper M.2, this only supports 2280 size drives, which are the kind of the run-of-the-mill ones which most manufacturers sell now. It's the most popular size, so there isn't actually any options to moving that at all. So if you do have a smaller drive, unfortunately it won't fit. So do make sure you buy 2280 size drives. You've got no heatsink or anything on here, so ideally, if you can, get a drive with a heatsink if you've got a drive which is going to be generating a little bit of heat. This is, like I said, PCI Express Gen 4 ×4, backwards compatible, so if you want to put a ×3 drive in there, then it's going to be absolutely fine. No issues there, you may even save a few quid as well. Also, on the far side there, another fan header, which is an ideal place for rear chassis fans. And moving back across, at the bottom there, so we've got another M.2 slot. This will support both SATA and NVMe drives from the chipset and is only PCI Express Gen 3 ×2. Down in this bottom corner, so this is our front panel I/O for connecting up things like your reset switch, power switch, hard drive LED, that kind of stuff. Then you've got another USB 3.0 port there. Next to that, there is another fan header, again PWM, voltage, water pump, whatever you want to use it on. Next to that, a pair of USB 2.0 headers. Then another fan header, a CMOS reset or BIOS reset. Next to that, a TPM header, should you wish to use an external TPM. Realistically, I think most people stick to the TPM actually on the chip itself, but it's there as an option. Next to that, addressable RGB and RGB again. So 3-pin 5-volt addressable and 4-pin 12-volt regular RGB. And then next to that, we've got our front panel header. Front panel header is for the onboard audio, which is the Realtek 897 or 887, depending on which version you get. Essentially, they're both the same. Support 7.1 surround audio, all that kind of usual stuff. Little chip down there in the corner. Got some capacitors there, which are pretty decent capacitors for the audio. It's not going to be great audio. If you want to get really good audio, then you're probably best off using a separate USB DAC or some kind of add-in sound card, but certainly it's going to be more than serviceable for most people. At the bottom here, so there is a PCI Express Gen 3 x 2 slot. Above that, PCI Express Gen 3 x 1. Above that, we've got our main graphics card slot, which is going to be your PCI Express Gen 4 x 16. Just underneath there, we have our BIOS battery there, which they've actually put in a relatively convenient place. So if you do need to reset the BIOS or pop that out, you can do. If you've got maybe a dual slot card, bigger cards may cover that up, so do bear that in mind. But if not, you've still got the reset CMOS button at the bottom, right at the edge there, so it should be nice and easy to get to. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Obviously, you've got your AM4 socket up here, which will support a whole bunch of processors, although, like I said, some of the early ones and definitely the AMD Athlon series processors are 100% not supported on this particular board. So do bear that in mind if you're thinking of buying this as cheap and cheerful for maybe some kind of NAS or something, and you're thinking of getting an Athlon processor. Don't, it will not work. Also, when it comes to the VRM, which I didn't mention before, the actual lump of metal on there, nicely done. It's not overly big, so it isn't going to dissipate a great amount of heat, but you do have 50 amp chokes in there, which are quite nice. The fact that they've gone for 50 amp rather than 40 amp, so you do have a little bit of extra room there for processors. But again, don't really go getting 12 core processors and expecting to overclock them, because I think you'll probably find these will get a little bit toasty. Obviously, if you want to add a little bit more air cooling on there, potentially you could do. In a micro ATX box, there is normally a lot of room in there to circulate air, so again, do bear that in mind. On the back of the board, it's a pretty meagre affair. There's not a great deal going on here, but it does cover the basics, although it doesn't cover Wi-Fi. So those of you wondering, does this support Wi-Fi or Bluetooth? No, it doesn't 100%. You will need a separate Wi-Fi card or a Bluetooth adapter in order to use those protocols. But you do have two outputs, so if you're using a processor with an integrated graphics adapter in it, such as one of the 5600G, 5700G, that kind of thing, then you can use those there. So DisplayPort 1.4 and also HDMI 2.1, both of which are going to support up to 4K at 60 Hz. So you can use both monitors at the same time should you wish to, for maybe a stock tracker PC, that kind of thing. Next up, PS2 keyboard and mouse combo ports, which probably not that much use these days, but it is there nonetheless. Two USB 2.0s. Next up, we've got USB 3.2 Gen 1, and you've got another two there, which are going to be USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports. Above that, you've got your Gigabit Ethernet, which is your standard Realtek 8111H. 10100 Gigabit, yeah, it does the job. It would have been nice to have seen 2.5 Gigabit on here, but again, it is a slightly lower class board, so not really a necessity, but would have been nice to see. Next to that, you've got your audio output jacks, which are color-coded, so pink for the mic, green for the earphone, and blue for line. Again, in the software for the Realtek chipset, you can configure those however you want to. If you want to use an analog 7.1 signal, you will need to repurpose the front panel audio connectors in order to give you those extra channels. But other than that, I think that is pretty much it. As far as I can see, there isn't really anything this board does drastically wrong, and considering it is a slightly more budget offering, pairing this with something like a Ryzen 5 3600 or even a 5600, it's going to be a fantastic little platform. And realistically, these days, most games, if you are into gaming, most games are going to be more dependent on your GPU than your CPU and your motherboard platform. So potentially you could save some money here and put it towards your graphics card. But that's what I think about it. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below. But that's going to be the Asrock B550M Pro Gaming 4. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.